Well, hello, YouTube. Welcome to the A16Z YouTube channel. My name is Frank Chen, and today I'm here with Kouki Harasaki and Nate Chang, members of the A16Z bio team. Kouki works on what we call our market development team, which helps startups find friends in the big companies, and Nate does the same thing for our corporate development partners, which are sources of financing for our startups. And so, welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Well, 2019 looks like it is off to a fast start for bio M&A. So we had Bristol Myers Squibb buying Celgene, we've got Takeda and Shire, we've got the GE biopharma divestiture, and so all of this has happened in the sort of early months of 2019. So let's start with this. Why all the activity all of a sudden?
Yeah, so I think looking back over the last year, there are three major trends that have created this perfect storm for where we find ourselves now. The first is patent cliffs, the second is an excess of cash, and the third is a decrease in valuations across the board. So on the topic of patent cliffs, so a lot of the major biopharma companies in 2018 saw loss of exclusivity on major drugs. Roche lost exclusivity on Xolair and Rituxan. Pfizer lost exclusivity on Lyrica, and GSK lost exclusivity on Advair. And so the need to replace those products, replace those revenue streams was there in 2018. And then on the topic of cash, the top 10 biopharma companies came into 2018 with about $150 billion of cash on the balance sheet. So the need was there, and the ability to fill that need was also there. And then another interesting wrinkle is between January and December of 2018, the NASDAQ Biotechnology Index went down 7%. And so there was this general trend of biotechnology companies across the board decreasing in valuations. And so suddenly companies became more attractive or more vulnerable to acquisition.
So I need new assets. I have the money. Things look like they got a little cheaper. Do you agree? This is what's happening?
I think the buyer psyche changed too, specifically in the fourth quarter where across all sectors of the market saw a downturn in trading, but I think the buyer universe actually strengthened across pharma. If you look at pharma stocks, how they closed it at the end of 2018, they were in much better position. So I think the buyer psyche changed in terms of, well, we should certainly change our aperture and re-examine some of the key targets that we've been looking at.
And what do you think drove that? Like the psychology change? Why is now the right time, whereas mid last year it wasn't the right time?
I think part of it is data-driven. If you look at Spark, which got announced yesterday, they had a lot of nice tailwinds in their hemophilia franchise, and Roche really looked at their Hem-A program as a catalyst for stepping in that transaction. With respect to Loxo, they got through their regulatory filings and are about to launch a drug. So I think part of it also is buyers want to control the launch and control the commercial message.
Take me into the psychology of a corporate buyer, right? Which is, there's a couple strategies that you might be trying to implement, like, look, I need a new asset, I need to double down on sort of my areas of core competence, or maybe I need to get rid of things that aren't my core competence. So talk to me a little bit about what might drive the decision to buy or sell.
Yeah, I think part of it, a lot of it is just growth and the TAM and what the patient populations and the revenue I'm trying to capture with this new product. But it's also, if you actually think about gene therapy and new technologies, they are creating the moat. Meaning, for example, Avexis and SMA, they are probably the leading gene therapy program out there, and they want to continue building that franchise and have not only face a patent cliff, but with a new modality, they could actually have more sustained cash flows. So with Avexis emerging in gene therapy, with Luxturna and the other Spark programs emerging in hemophilia, I think those two buyers really felt that those are going to be the leading platforms in gene therapy. Granted, they're two different disease areas, but they felt we could build pretty strong franchises here.
Yeah, and I think the operative word here is platform. So the industry in general saw the gene therapy field maturing. and relatively synchronously started making investments. And so, when we had Voss do the podcast for us earlier this year, he talked about the investment. This is CEO Voss Narasimhan of Novartis. He talked a lot about Avexis and how he saw that as a real platform play. So the lead asset, AXVS-101, it certainly is going to be probably best in class for SMA, but it also gave Novartis an AAV9 vector platform that it could use to deliver other gene therapies. And then with the Spark acquisition, same thing. Roche was a laggard in the space, and now suddenly leaped ahead with not only a marketed gene therapy, but this AAV platform that it could use for delivering other gene therapies.
Talk to me more about platforms, because especially for our software viewers, platforms mean something like Linux or the Win32 API or these days AWS. Mm-hmm. What is a bio platform? Why all the interest?
Yeah, so I think the most common platform is a drug discovery platform. Mm-hmm. And I think this is one of the existential kind of questions a lot of biopharma, early stage companies have to go through. There are many companies that have proprietary drug discovery platform methodology with the promise of discovering multiple new drugs. But oftentimes those companies will have to focus on a few select programs to partner. And so the existential question is really around, hey, do we try to go it alone, preserve the platform, and hopefully have it realize kind of the full kind of breadth of discoveries we can make, or do we get acquired by a company, they develop the lead assets, and then the platform itself gets shelved.
Mm-hmm. So the platform is sort of shared R&D, shared know-how that could potentially lead to different assets. Is that sort of the way to think about a platform?
Yeah. I think the terms also changed a little bit. If you actually look at Spark, it definitely has its anchor in gene therapy, but I think the thing that gets underappreciated in biopharma is downstream capabilities. And so they have a manufacturing facility on Market Street in Philadelphia, and I think that was a key strategic asset. I think other gene therapy companies have done the same. Unicure built a manufacturing facility. Audentes has done the same too. So I think the platform is not just an enabling technology to source and discover new drugs, but it's also the breadth of end-to-end solutions for a modality.
Yeah, and I think that's spot on. So when we met with Voss, he talked about Avexis, again being a platform, but also giving Novartis scalable manufacturing in the gene therapy space. So you're right. I mean, there specialized fields like gene therapy carry with it very specific functional know-how that they need, big companies need to bring on board wholesale.
Great. And just on Voss, he made 2 acquisitions in the radio-labeled target oncology space. So with AAA and Endocyte being the most recent acquisition, they were able to secure that supply chain for that specific radioisotope. So I think that in itself is a sort of an enablement and platform for that company.
Yep. And Nate, zooming up a level, maybe talk about how much M&A has already happened this year. We're just about to hit March, and compare that to last year.
Yeah.
Like how many dollars are we talking about?
So in 2018, the industry announced $123 billion of M&A transactions. This year, we're at $94 billion.
Wow. We just hit March.
Right? Exactly.
We're about to hit March. All right, fast start.
Yeah.
It's fast start. We'll hopefully see continued pace throughout 2019. Part of it's also capital markets driven. I think we're going to continue to see a slightly slower pace in terms of IPO exits, but there's certainly a lot of companies that were eyeing the capital markets in 2019, and we'll see if that pace continues.
Yeah. Now imagine you're sitting in the seat where you're in a corporation and you're trying to figure out, how do I deploy my dollars? right? And at one end of the spectrum, we have these sort of massive blockbuster deals, right? And we're off to a fast start this year with them. On the other end of the spectrum, I could take, 100, 200, $500 million and sort of invest early in companies alongside investors like us, right? Like the bio fund. And sort of, what's your general advice? How should I think about deploying capital late versus deploying capital early?
Yeah, I think Celgene had a great playbook. They were very active in looking at earlier stage companies in terms of licensing with equity, or also licensing with an option to buy. They had all those structures laid out for a lot of their early stage investments. I'd say from a strategic perspective, I think there are multiple inputs that go into this. For early stage companies, it's going to be an R&D decision, and they're going to be the ones that catalyze the decision in terms of going all in on a platform or early stage company. So I think most companies will want to be more risk averse and rent versus buying technology to enable their R&D productivity in the short term. I think most acquisitions that you see in biotech are late stage to marketed stage companies. So I think pharma companies are still very conservative in terms of making big bets on early stage platforms for acquisition.
Say more about this sort of rent versus buy, which means it's going to be a licensing agreement of some sort rather than an outright acquisition?
Yeah, so just on the early stage, I think this is also very common with platform technologies, especially very new, differentiated ones. You see big pharma companies either use their corporate venture arm to invest early, which is a good way of looking under the hood. And then, a later stage, setting up potentially some kind of partnership agreement, co-development agreement, where it's basically a handoff with the big pharma company taking over at a later development stage. So option agreements are pretty common. Option agreements effectively allow a big pharma company to outsource R&D, not have it appear on their R&D line on the P&L, and decide at a later date whether they want to continue or not. And so I think deals like that around platforms will continue on. In terms of acquisitions, we saw Clementia get acquired by Ipsen, and that's a classic single asset company. It's common to see single asset companies really kind of get further along in development because it's really a binary bet that you're making, and so
the drug works or not.
Exactly. So it's typical to see pharma companies wait for proof of concept, phase 2A data that shows safety and some efficacy before doubling down. Now, there are some areas of clear exception. So very competitive hot areas like oncology, immuno-oncology over the last few years. You've seen this shift in acquisitions earlier on in phase 1 and actually even earlier just because it was so competitive. And that was a very strange phenomenon because people were really making large bets in absence of any human data.
Let's sort of switch hats. So we talked about it from the point of view of sort of the large corporate buyer. How should I be thinking about it? Let's think about it from the point of view of a startup executive, which is, I just finished my PhD or my postdoc and I've got some miraculous way to build a diagnostic or build a therapeutic. And then I start down the path, and at some point, I'm going to need to engage with the existing incumbents who have all of the distribution. How should I be thinking about those conversations, and what are some best practices that you would sort of have for people in that boat who are starting those conversations?
Sure. So I think early on, it's a mistake that happens all too often is to think about big pharma as this kind of nebulous hole that you'll kind of deal with later. It's actually quite important to look at the landscape, understand what therapeutic areas are high priorities for the major biopharma companies. Start thinking about who you want to partner with, and engage them at the right time. And so that timing is dependent on a lot of factors. But I think sharing the same vision is really the most important thing. Some of the most successful partnerships I've seen, even early stage, the head of R&D just absolutely loved the science, loved the technology, and was committed as an internal champion. And then deals that are more transactional tend to happen later, where companies kind of look at a late stage asset as just a revenue stream that's going to come online in 2 years or 3 years. And so another really important consideration is what kind of partnership or merger do you want in the future, and what capabilities do you want to contribute, and what do you want your partner to contribute? So again, anybody can kind of do some research, understand the landscape, and really hone in on ideal partners for them. And then there are other considerations later on where some big pharma companies will just tend to fully integrate the company, whereas others will, like Roche and Spark, will allow the acquired companies to operate semi-autonomously.
I think articulating the total addressable market and where you're going to be in that treatment paradigm is pretty key for the therapeutics companies, because they kind of paint a broad stroke. I'm going to be an oncology company, I'm going to target X, but you're going to be fifth line or fourth line. How does that move the needle meaningfully for a physician, but also then for the partner in terms of how they think about their commercial strategy in a sort of a 5 to 10 year horizon. And kind of understanding that, and you may not have all the numbers and where all the chips will fall, because it's a very fluid field, because there are probably 100 oncology companies that are development stage that are targeting the same tumor type. So I think having that context and being thoughtful about that it lends a lot of credibility to your story.
Yeah, and I think that's a very fair point, because at the end of the day, if you're an operator, a founder, you've really put your blood, sweat, and tears and your life on the line to create something, and it's your baby. And if you're going to pass it on to somebody else, you want to make sure that your baby is well taken care of. And so, in negotiations, I think the tone really reveals whether you're a high priority or not for the company. And just in the extreme cases, I can tell you that big companies that really want an asset, that really want to show commitment to that program, will fly a big portion of their executive committee out in final negotiations to say, hey, we're committed. And that's kind of the strongest vote of confidence that you can see.
If you don't see the busload of executives unload at your front door, you're probably not going to get the premium price.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Kouki, I know that you brought some props for us today, and why don't we use the props as a way to talk about this sort of age-old sort of battle between startups and the incumbents. And the age-old battle is, look, the startups have the innovation. They're going to be inventing the new therapies, creating the new assets, but the incumbents have all the distribution. They know how to sell, they know how to get reimbursements, and so on and so forth. And there's been a lot of change in the way that you can sell. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so exactly. I mean, the traditional kind of partnering model, a co-development model, was the company would do the discovery and early stage development, and then at some point pass it on to the big pharma partner to develop and get approvals and get distribution. I think what we've seen really over the last 10 years is a lot of boards want the companies to be able to be standalone. And so what you see are, and this is fairly typical, and actually Spark is a good example, where the company will keep commercial rights for the US and out-license ex-US rights. So in the case of Luxturna with Spark, they kept the US rights and out-license the ex-US rights to Novartis, which is actually a weird entanglement now because the two Basel-based rivals are sharing an asset. So I think that's been a change. Companies do want a chance to be standalone in many cases, in terms of again, this goes back to the conversation about what the company hopes to contribute versus what the partner, the big pharma partner, hopes to contribute, and again, it comes down to a level of commitment. If the asset is very critical to the business, the pharma company will, in all likelihood, want to control the manufacturing and distribution, unless it is a very niche, specialized product like gene therapies and AAVs, which require specialized know-how. And it's understandable if it's mission critical to get the quality manufacturing CMC right.
Yep. Great. Fantastic. Well, thanks guys for joining me on this hot take of all the M&A news. And if you liked what you saw, go ahead and subscribe to our channel, and we will see you in the next episode. Bye now.